And so the Chicago question that you actually mentioned, I didn't realize that these were for Chicago specifically, but the new ads that Bernie has released
Yes.
post the debate. If you have information on those, that I think that's a great discussion to have, because
So
it's
I
sounds
don't
like
know
exactly
if
what they want.
we could drop, someone can drop the link. If I shared it, I think the link might have gone into the chat room. If you guys haven't checked them out, check them out, share them, spread them all wide. I know people get mad because there's not television ads running in every state. You know, these TV ads, and I've seen complaints. I mean, I've seen people have started sharing, the articles that came out after the Laquan McDonald cover up was the lid was blown off, basically, by an investigative journalist and some activists. Basically, for those who are not familiar, the Laquan McDonald was a young man who was murdered by Chicago police last year. And there's always this talk about video cams and body cams and dash cams, and well, where's the recording? That's a really good question. So basically, the city stalled releasing. They what ended up coming out through FOIA requests and this really great work done by a investigative journalist and, like I said, local activists. Pushing and pushing and pushing. The video finally comes out, and this young man was targeted, and I mean, it's it's another one of those cases where you're just like, this type of stuff should not happen. Unfortunately, it does. What the major outrage has been, uproar has been, it seems like Rom and his staff, whether he did it directly or they did it on his behalf, because at the time he was running against Chuy Garcia for mayor, and Rom was running for re-election. It seems like this video, this incident, this cover-up was buried because of because it happened, before the election, and there was basically came after this happened. There was no way in hell Rom would have got re-elected, by all accounts. What makes it so egregious is the lengths the police lied, of course. There's information that they tampered with evidence. There was video from a Burger King across the street that completely showed something different. They erased part of the video. It was egregious. And there are other cases. This is just the one that really kicked everything off. But there are other cases where they have refused to release the video, where it's come out that people have lied in their incident reports and things like that nature. So when that came out, Bernie Sanders issued a statement, and just anyone involved needs to resign. That's deplorable. You can look up the statement, very, very swift and clear. And I think he was asked around that time about, doesn't he think he needs Rom's support to win Chicago? And he's like, I don't want his vote, was basically Bernie's response. Hillary Clinton, when she was asked about it, for those who are not aware, there's a long relationship and history with Rom and the Clintons. They're associates. They're more than associates. And then he also worked in the Obama White House in the first term before becoming mayor of Chicago. So she has a connection and relationship. Both her and President Obama do. This is another place. All those Obama lovers out there. I mean, I do respect the president. I do like him in terms of a lot of issues. But this is another place. His unwavering support for Rahm Emanuel bothers me. When you understand what Rahm has, exacerbated and done in Chicago. Same thing with Hillary Clinton. She tried to kind of back off a little bit, but she's not actually come out. She has her Mothers of the Movement. There's a great meme someone shared with me earlier. She has her Mothers of the Movement. She can say Trayvon's name. She can say Jordan Davis, but she's not, she's not engaged upon. She's not even tried to talk. So it's going to be interesting with her in Chicago how this all plays out, because the response to Chicago. There's also the Holman Square black site. Basically, cops were taking people there, suspects there, off the grid type of thing, for off the grid investigation, interrogations and things of that nature and being investigated. And now, out of all this has come out, all this egregious behavior has come out. to the light, the Justice Department is investigating, and they're not just investigating that Laquan McDonald case I was telling you about. They're investigating the Chicago Police Department as a whole. I do not know off the top of my head how far it goes back, but there is an investigation that's ongoing, and there is a history in Chicago, like other major cities. Chicago has a notorious past when it comes to police brutality issues. When you look at talk about Chicago police brutality, I mean, if you know anything, immediately John Burge and Area 2 comes to your mind. I mean, the John Burge cases, the torture cases, are part of the reason why Illinois enacted a moratorium on the death penalty and then subsequently abolished it altogether. I mean, there were so many false confessions and all types of other abuses and atrocities that came out of that whole era of him running things, Area 2 Special Command in Chicago. Ultimately, he was charged because by the time, investigations and stuff, the statute of limitations had ran out. Ultimately, he was charged, I believe it was perjury or obstruction of justice. It was something less benign. And when all was said and done, John Burge still gets to keep his pension. So citizens in Illinois are still paying this man's pension despite all the criminal acts that he committed. So that at that time, when that investigation happened, people were like, no, you need to investigate the whole department, and that investigation was narrowed to just Area 2. Now, and in light of what has happened, we knew happened before, and everybody acted like things had gotten better. Clearly, there's a need to really dig in and look at. So it'll be interesting to see what comes out of the investigation ultimately. But this happened because of people power, right? This happened because there was an investigative journalist who dug really deep. This happened because the community did not let up. And since the information has come out, the community has risen up even more. So hopefully, that activism will continue. And what has been great to see is that there has been collaboration between, pro-Bernie people. And there are actually quite a few pro-Bernie people who worked grassroots in the Chewy campaign, who were anti-Rom anyway. So they
I've seen a lot of protests in Chicago.
There's been a lot of protests.
Down with Rom, up with Bernie type chant.
Yeah. Like one of the early marches they had in Chicago, there's this beautiful young activist. I don't know if you call young men beautiful. He's like 17 years old, Lamar Record. Love him dearly. There's video of him speaking. He's very eloquent. Motivation. That's
I remember him. Yeah, I remember.
There's so many youth activists involved across the country. This is exciting. You have more of your more experienced and seasoned activists, but then you have this great cadre of young activists coming up, and they're working together, which is great. Trying to really leverage meaningful outcomes in places like Chicago. But seeing that support for Bernie Sanders. So there are 3 new commercials that got released in Illinois, and the first one is called Work of His Life, and it's basically explaining the history, right? Bernie's commitment to racial justice and equality. Like he said the other night, he's been fighting for economic inequality issues, for economic equality, for the last 40 years of his life, and his record overwhelmingly supports that. I mean, no one is perfect, but that's overwhelmingly what he has been doing. The next commercial, because there are 3 different ones, and he's just hitting from all these different angles. The next one is narrated by the one and only Chewy Garcia. I mean, Chewy should have been the guy. I know people all over the country who were phone banking and stuff for Chewy. Chewy should have been it. But the one thing, if we've learned anything from that runoff election between Rahm Emanuel and Chewy Garcia, it's just people need to get out and vote. We got to get the vote out. Chewy's race, that was another example of if the voter turnout and it's hard because it's a runoff election. So people are like, oh my God, I've already voted one time. We got to do a better job of educating our communities on the process and voting and why it matters. Because that was a situation where he should have won. He should have been the president. He should have been the mayor. But when it came time to that runoff election, the turnout just was not in his favor. So the second, commercial that's released is Transformative Change, and it's going to air in Spanish and in English, which is pretty cool. And and Chewy's just talking about how like Bernie Sanders is the person, for creating that real change, and which is good because again, Chicago, Illinois, this is some place that really could use a lift, that type of change going forward. Like the issues with Rauner, the governor, are huge, and people are just like, why did we let this happen? Like we need to do something. So I think like that partnership, and Bernie and Chewy already had a relationship before now. Bernie helped, he endorsed and he helped campaign for Chewy previously. So their partnership I think is going to be crucial in terms of that. So that's the second because we're only to commercial number 2. And again, if we didn't already do it, we'll definitely put the link in the chat. And then the last ad is from a Chicago public school principal. And he highlights, because I know a lot of people have been asking about this, he highlights Hillary Clinton's support and relationship with Mayor Rahm Emanuel. Now, I've seen somebody say, oh, that's a low blow, or oh, that's stretching it. It's really not. It's not a low blow. It's not a stretch because she does support him. She has, not said anything, when asked about, his handling of all these issues and stuff came up in like December or so, it was, what was it? It was just like, oh, well, he loves Chicago and he's doing a good job. So either you're out of touch with the issues or you don't care about the issues that are affecting the common folk. And when we're talking about loving Chicago, they love a certain segment of Chicago, that benefits a certain group of people.
Mm-hmm.
Because in addition to like all of this stuff, there's been exacerbation in school closures. There was an issue where he tried to, like we had a question earlier about how do you engage people, how do you talk to people, making sure people are aware like when they're having school meetings and how to even look for like what's going on and changes and announcements. He tried to, like schools that were closed, he tried to have backdoor deals to sell the buildings off for business gain purposes.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just sell off public
And that's
buildings.
another thing about Clinton is that when they were in Michigan, and I think an activist, was it from Chicago, came and talked to them and asked them a question about education. She attacked what was happening in Detroit as deplorable and said that the management needs to resign and everything else, and talked about how what was going on there was horrible, but no one's holding her accountable for still supporting Rahm when he's doing those exact same things as a Democrat. She was fine with attacking Rick Snyder for what he's done to Detroit schools and what he's done to Flint.
And Flint, yeah, exactly.
But when it comes to Rahm, who's been her family advisor in the Clinton family and was Obama's chief of staff, there's less apprehension, and that's the difference. Is that Bernie doesn't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat. He'll call you out and he'll try to get someone to run against you, and do everything he can to beat that person. That's the difference between the two campaigns and the two movements. That look at Tim Canova and Debbie Wasserman Schultz, that race. He was an advisor for Bernie early on in the campaign. That's that kind of difference. Campaigning with someone like that, he's saying, I don't care if you have a D in front of your name. If you're doing things that aren't progressive, that aren't for the benefit of the working families of this country, I'm going to call you out, and I'm going to do anything I can to change that.
Right, exactly. And I think that's the difference. Like not being so beholden. And we talk about the Chicago political machine, you talk about any political machine, right? I mean, like this is going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. But like I said, there's a lot of collaboration and overlap going on between different activist groups and stuff in the city. And making that connection between Rahm Emanuel and Hillary Clinton is a very strong one, because there are a lot of people. There are some people who don't, either they're not making a connection or they don't think it's fair to make the connection. But when your response to finding out like someone has, like you said, it's very easy to criticize Rick Snyder, right? Because Rick Snyder is from the opposing party. You have no relationship with him, to our knowledge anyway. But you have no relationship to him, and it's socially, everybody's on the bandwagon condemning Rick Snyder, right? But then when it's talking about someone who's has been a staffer, a confidant, a team member, maybe even a friend, it's, oh yeah, I'm confident. I mean, she was quoted as saying, I'm confident he's going to do everything he can to get to the bottom of this. It's just like, okay. I mean, but there's been so much that has been done, which is why people were really, really disappointed that he won re-election, because from the closing of the mental health centers and putting people out on the streets, the school closures. I mean, school closures were already exacerbated were already going crazy. Turnarounds under Daley with Arnie Duncan at the helm. You know, I did a project, and you had Chicago Housing Authority. Chicago's wild. You have the Chicago Housing Authority, right? You have the Chicago Public Schools. Chicago Housing Authority was redeveloping all the big, major, large public housing developments. You had your Cabrini Green, you had your Robert Taylor Homes, Stateway Gardens, um, all these different developments, and no one thought to communicate. So I have schools that are almost exclusively attended by public housing resident children of public housing, right? Public housing, public schools, never communicated. So we're relocating one. We're relocating people, but we're not going to let you know that we're relocating people. So it's like, hey, they relocated people. Now they're only like 10. They're, schools are underpopulated. But we're going to close the school down. No communication. But their plan is to bring people back to the community. So now you bring people back to the community, but there's no community school, or the school has been turned over to a charter school that does not have a neighborhood boundary. So now you have an issue where you have a school, you have children in a community with no school to go to. So there are all these different like issues and concerns that are going on. We're talking about that was happening. You know, there's a thing called the Mid-South Plan in Chicago, and that was happening under Arnie Duncan, and all these school closures. And I mean, they changed all the different testing requirements, all types of stuff happened. And then Rahm comes in and like takes it to a whole new level with the school closures and displacing students. And the standard was you'd move kids to a better performing school, right? If you're closing a school for underperformance. Better performing in some cases, from like the basic research I did, was you're talking about a school that might be performing at like 23%, meets and exceeds whatever the different state measures are, to a school that performs 40% meets and exceeds. Either way, both schools are doing poorly. You have one school that's just doing slightly better, but then that school is struggling, and now you're adding more struggling students without any additional resources or support. And then because of the way the cycle is going with the turnover in some of these neighborhoods, they're just reshuffling all those kids then later on. Like I looked over a several year period, and they were reshuffling students. So we closed this school, then the school they go to we closed, then we closed this other school. So you've had kids that go to so many different schools, and you're adding on the burden to additional schools without increasing funding, without providing additional support and options. So, when Hillary Clinton is confident in Rahm Emanuel, when she's confident, because Rahm Emanuel has continued the legacy of Arnie Duncan before him, when you're confident in this structure, that's an issue when we're talking about providing better opportunity for working families and their children and their communities. Like, that's a problem. When you're confident in the way he's handled these police brutality and police killing cases, that's a problem. So these commercials, and everyone's been wondering if he was going to do something like that, and they're rolling out. If you're not in Illinois, you can definitely check them out online. They're up on. I found them. Someone sent them to me. They're on burningpost.com today. So this just from the school principal, Troy LaRiviere. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that properly. This is quote. He just said, like, in Chicago we have endured a corrupt political system, and the chief politician standing in the way of us getting good schools is our mayor. If you have a presidential candidate that supports someone like our mayor, you have a candidate who is not willing to take on the establishment. Bernie Sanders is definitely not afraid to take on the system. He looks beyond the system, sees better possibilities for us. He sees that this is not the way it has to be. And you have so many people. You have so many teachers who are struggling in the way things are going. Now going back to the Day of Action coming up with Chicago Teachers Union. You have so many students. You have administrators. I mean, it's a rough system to be in. I'm sure there are problems everywhere, but there's a lot that's just been going wrong. And people, hopefully, through all this outreach and activism that happened, are really feeling empowered to make a stand and make a difference. But that's Cook County. That's Chicago. How it will play out with the rest of the state, I think, bears to be seen. But the state as a whole, you have the issues with Rahm in Chicago, but the state as a whole is really struggling under this nut job governor they have, Rauner. Like, it's it's problematic on so many level. Again, vote often, vote early, vote often. I mean,
Yep.
talk to your friends,
The way I
break
see
it
that
down in real
primary
simple
going,
layers.
under normal circumstances, I think the thing would be Bernie would win outside of Chicago, and Hillary would expect that she would win the black population of Chicago and win it by such a large margin that she wins the state anyway. That's what I think their plan would be. And so releasing these ads to make it so Bernie maybe gets closer to splitting the black vote, he could
Hmm.
very well win Illinois, and a win with Illinois, a win in Ohio. I don't know much about Missouri. I know the demographics favor him. It's not an overwhelmingly African American state, and it's not about down in the South. It's not all the way down in the South. It's more Midwest. So I think Missouri is in play as well. And so I think the map is looking really good, especially with these kind of ads. This kind of targeted advertising is really good. I've heard some black activists talk about how they've heard radio ads for Bernie in Missouri, which is good. Uh, the talking about the radio stations they hear them on and the different ones they hear on different stations, and so they're
Hmm.
definitely taking it seriously, which is good.
Yeah, I mean, it is really, really good. The other, like, still, I know you're just like, oh my God, all this Chicago. No, look, there's some good stuff out of Chicago today. I'm just saying, they got shared with me personally. I mean, like I said, there's a Democratic town hall coming up on Sunday. Be quiet, JP, at my school, the Ohio State University. Both Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders will be there on Sunday in Columbus, Ohio. He's going to be in Toledo, I think, at some point this weekend. I mean, there's a really strong group. Like Cleveland, shout out to Cleveland, Ohio, right? Because folks in Cleveland created their own office before the campaign even got there. Like, they pulled together and crowdfunded for an office to be able to organize about it. So grassroots is really stepping up and doing what they need to do. But to have another killer turnout, because like Solomon was saying, we do have these very important states coming up. Illinois is huge, and it should be a good win for Bernie, considering. I mean, that's a place where he maybe has like a little bit better relationships with some folks. But one of the